In the forest, a lumberjack unexpectedly witnessed an astonishing scene. A co-worker seemed to have been knocked down by something. Feeling both nervous and curious, he picked up an axe and walked forward. The next moment, the man widened his eyes in horror. Half of his co-worker's body had been chopped into pieces. After coming to his senses, he hurriedly got up and ran away, afraid of meeting the same fate as his co-worker. Perhaps due to his nervousness, the man accidentally fell into a trap, clutching the rock wall tightly with his hands because sharp wooden spikes were below. Taking a deep breath, he struggled to climb out of the pit and continued running. However, the next moment, he stepped into another trap, his whole body hanging upside down in midair. In a daze, he vaguely saw a strange man with a face like a skull approaching him. The scene shifts, and two couples are planning to go on an adventure in the primeval forest. Someone expresses concern that they have no wilderness survival experience. Isn't this just paying for suffering? The organizer, Jack, assures them by patting his chest that he has purchased 2 inflatable boats in advance, and the whole trip will be downstream, just like sightseeing. This puts everyone's worries to rest. Early the next morning, the 4 of them gather at the meeting point. Jack even specially invites a guide. This made everyone more assured about the upcoming journey, but they would never have thought that they were actually embarking on a road of no return. The guide was very professional, requiring everyone to wear life jackets, and even spending a lot of time teaching rowing techniques hand in hand. To be on the safe side, he wanted to put mobile phones and other valuables into waterproof bags. Only the bearded Johnson was unwilling to hand over his phone because he wanted to take photos along the way as a memento. Once everything was ready, the group followed the river into the depths of the forest, and the guide thoughtfully shared tales about this forest. Years ago, his grandfather disappeared in this area. Many people speculated that he encountered cannibals because villagers found his grandfather's belongings deep in the forest, and not far away, there were traces of human bones in the feces. Seeing the group's uneasy expressions, the guide quickly tried to smooth things over. Cannibals live in the deepest parts of the forest, and for nearly 100 years, no villagers have ever encountered them. However, in recent years, humans have been continuously cutting down trees, causing the cannibals' territories to shrink rapidly, and the food they can hunt is becoming scarcer. It's estimated that it won't be long before they starve to death. Meanwhile, 2 adventure bloggers rode their motorcycles into this forest. Ahead stood a warning sign prohibiting entry, but to gain views, they decided to take the risk and venture in. However, shortly after entering, the male blogger had his throat pierced by a figure. The female blogger sensed something was wrong, walked over to check, and was terrified to see her companion's head had been chopped off. She screamed and ran in the opposite direction. Wandering through the forest, the female blogger found a dark cave. She thought hiding inside would be safe, but the cave felt eerie. In a panic, the blogger took out her phone, and since there was no signal, she could only record a rescue video. Who knew that the next moment, the companion's head rolled to her feet, unexpectedly revealing this to be a trap. Meanwhile, Jack and the others were immersed in the beauty of nature, so lost in play that someone even jumped into the river to frolic. Since all the clothes were soaked, the guide had to find a place to camp early. Night fell without anyone noticing, and the guide knew the blonde girl was quite interested in the cannibals, so he started telling stories again. It is said that when cannibals catch prey, they do not kill them immediately, but instead limit their ability to move, allowing their offspring to start hunting, which is simply typical beastly behavior. At this moment, bearded Johnson appeared. Seeing his girlfriend and the guide chatting enthusiastically, he forcibly ended their conversation. As it did, Talter and 3, then everyone returned to their hammocks to sleep. But in the middle of the night, Johnson secretly met with Jack's girlfriend. I didn't expect their relationship to be so complicated. The next morning, everyone was surprised to find that Jack was missing along with the guide's kayak, which contained everyone's valuables. The guide suspected that Jack ran off with the money, but the others thought it was impossible. They decided to follow the river to search. Soon, a fork appeared ahead, with one side being a rushing river and the other very calm. Jack has no rowing experience, so he definitely went in this direction. However, the guide does not intend to continue forward, as it is very likely to pass through cannibal territory ahead. Johnson and the others pleaded repeatedly and promised to double the commission. Only then did the guide reluctantly lead the group forward. Fortunately, it wasn't long before they encountered the missing kayak. However, there was still no sign of Jack, and an ominous feeling arose in everyone's hearts. Could Jack have met with some accident? At this point, the guide refused to continue, only agreeing to wait in place for 1 hour. If the time exceeded, he would immediately roll away. Johnson and the other 2 had no choice but to venture into the jungle alone, hoping their friend Jack hadn't gone far. But soon their expressions turned serious as they found fresh bloodstains on the tree trunk, though they couldn't confirm if it was Jack's. Meanwhile, the guide alone by the river noticed some movement not far away and vaguely saw a figure flash by, so he bravely headed towards the jungle. The next moment, the guide's expression became extremely grave. He saw several skakrans on the ground, all dressed in human clothes, and a large number of ornaments hanging from the nearby tree. The guide thought this hat looked very much like the one his grandfather used to wear, but the next scene made his spine tingle even more. The guide sprinted back to the kayak, thinking he had escaped the pursuit of the savages. But the next moment, On the other side, the three, unaware, arrived at a cave where they unexpectedly found a motorcycle helmet, likely left by the previous blogger. Suddenly, a figure rushed out. It was Jack, who had been missing for a long time. Faced with his girlfriend's accusations, he explained that he left the group because he had a bloated stomach and wanted to move around to digest. Seeing Jack safe and sound, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Johnson remembered the guide's cannibal tribe legend and suggested they should leave as soon as possible. However, when they returned to the riverside, they found the guide was missing. The group concluded that he must have run away, but Johnson accidentally found the guide's dagger and speculated that he must have encountered an accident. Now everyone was unsettled, only thinking about leaving this primitive forest as soon as possible. However, not long after, they came across the guide's kayak, which was covered in still wet bloodstains, and Jack saw a steaming iron pot on the shore. The group curiously approached and couldn't help but scream on the spot. It turned out that the pot was stewing the guide's head. The group of four was so frightened that they kept retreating, just wanting to escape this place of trouble as soon as possible. Johnson couldn't help but curse, saying that if Jack hadn't wandered off, none of this wouldn't happen. But they didn't notice a figure quietly slipping into the water. The four of them paddled the kayak with all their might and soon found their path blocked by a tree trunk. Johnson thought about lifting the kayak over it, but as he bent down, he noticed something seemed to be hidden underwater. The next moment, the figure sprang out. Caught off guard, Johnson was hit without any chance to defend himself. Fortunately, his three friends came to his aid in time. The blonde goat picked up a rock and smashed it against the wild man's head, and Johnson took the opportunity to finish him off, finally dealing with the wildcat. But when they came to their senses, they realized that the kayak had drifted away with the river. Having lost their only means of transportation, they had no choice but to continue on foot. What they didn't know was that the savage they had just beaten was not dead. A red-hooded savage discovered this, and instead of helping his companions, ended his life with a knife, and even took out his heart to eat. This was clearly a more formidable opponent. Without the guide to lead them, Johnson and the others could only wander aimlessly in the jungle. Before they knew it, night had fallen, and the four of them were already exhausted. Dawson naively thought that the cannibals would not pursue them anymore. While the long-haired girl was full of worry, she hadn't forgotten the guide's words. The cannibals are like beasts in the jungle. They haven't attacked only because they aren't hungry, treating them as prey being raised. This reminder made everyone hair stand on end. Jack suggested taking turns with Johnson to keep watch, ensuring they could get through the night safely. When it was Johnson's turn, he took out his phone out of boredom, but unfortunately, there was no signal here, otherwise they wouldn't be so passive. There were too many mosquitoes in the jungle, so Johnson came up with a bad idea, which was to cover his whole body with mud. Many animals in nature do this. It was this unintended action that allowed him to accidentally avoid the sight of the red-hooded savage. Johnson was quietly drawing a dagger from behind, but he seriously overestimated his own combat ability. Even with a sneak attack from behind, Johnson was so disoriented by the Red Hood's blows that he couldn't find his bearings. Fortunately, Jack heard the commotion and came to assist, but he could only find his slight distraction. Johnson, not paying attention, slipped and unfortunately rolled down the slope. When he climbed back to the previous battle spot, poor Jack had already been captured by the Red Hood, and three savages stood not far ahead. He knew that with his own strength, he couldn't rescue anyone right under their noses. Johnson could only silently apologize, and then quietly retreated into the bushes. All for long, Jack was forcibly dragged back to the cannibal drabe, his ankle seableed with a knife. As the guide had said, his fate was to become a tool for training the cannibal's offspring. Jack endured the severe pain as he moved through the forest, but was soon hunted down by the cannibal's descendants. When dawn finally broke, Johnson woke up the two sleeping girls, falsely claiming that Jack had gone to find a boat, and urged them to continue through the forest. However, they had already entered the heart of the cannibals' territory, and escape would not be so easy. Sure enough, it wasn't long before they were spotted by the lookout savages. The three of them ran like mad, with Jack's girlfriend in the lead. She accidentally rushed into a cannibal trap, and her shoulder was pierced by a wooden stick. Johnson noticed a rope on a nearby tree, so he tied it to the blonde girl and slowly lowered her down. He used a dagger to cut off the wooden spike, and finally rescued Jack's girlfriend. However, they didn't dare to relax at all, as the cannibals were far behind them, and ahead was upon several meters deep. Choosing the lesser of two evils, the blonde girl jumped in first, followed closely by Johnson and the other person. The watcher ahead gradually became calmer, and the depth dropped below their knees. A rubber dinghy happened to be stranded not far away, and they jumped onto it as if grabbing a lifeline. Drifting downstream was better than running aimlessly, especially since they hadn't eaten for more than a day. The two girls soon fell asleep from exhaustion, but Johnson didn't dare relax at all. He noticed shadows flickering on the shore from time to time, knowing the cannibals would never let them go. Johnson stole himself, quietly swam ashore, and took out his phone, intending to record a video as a farewell message. At this moment, the savage with the red head covering was stealthily approaching, following the sound to find Johnson's phone. Just as he was engrossed, Johnson suddenly attacked from behind, desperately knocking away the savage's weapon, but unfortunately, he was still no match for him. At this moment, the red-capped man noticed the two girls on the boat. He casually stuck his dagger into a tree and used a vine to tightly wrap around Johnson's neck. While waiting for the boat to get closer, Johnson actually took the dagger from the tree, cut the vine, and didn't forget to throw it with all his might. The red-hooded man fell into the water in Kane, and Johnson grappled with him again. This time, he was lucky enough to find the red-hooded man's lying knife in the water. In an instant, he lifted the knife to the back and forcefully chopped off the red-hooded man's head. But just as Johnson breathed a sigh of relief, more Campbells appeared one after another. For the safety of the two girls, the man took a deep breath, picked up his weapon, and charged towards the shore. As expected, Johnson fell heroically under the savage's wooden club. However, his sacrifice bought enough time for the two girls. They drifted downstream, quickly escaping the cannibal territory, and were eventually rescued by a kind driver on the roadside. That's the entire content of the 2025 Danish thriller, Blood River. After watching this movie, the biggest takeaway is to never travel to remote places. Alright, that's it for today. If you enjoyed it, remember to keep following us. See you next time.